You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the animated series episode, The Terratin Incident. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the show. We have your listener feedback on our recent discussion of the TNG episode, Angel 1. And you'll enjoy that. Be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Trek in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or on the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should hit the bell to get notifications. And you can find that at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. And finally, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network I'm certain you'll enjoy called Let's Science. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/science. So, Jimmy, how about a recap of the Terratin incident?
This week, the Enterprise gets a mysterious message containing the word Terratin and goes to investigate. They approach a crystal-rich planet, but they are bombarded by strange rays that destroy their dilithium crystals. They are thus unable to get away by warp. The rays also cause organic matter, including human bodies, to shrink, and in 30 minutes, the crew will be too small to operate the ship. In desperation, Kirk beams down to the center of where the bombardment is coming from on the planet, and it stops. He also discovers that he has returned to normal size because of the transporter process, and he discovers a miniature city on the planet. When he returns to the Enterprise, he finds the bridge crew missing. He makes contact with the miniature city and meets their leader on FaceTime. The leader explains that their planet is doomed, and they were unable to contact the Enterprise by conventional means, so in desperation they used their invasion defense system, which caused everyone on the Enterprise to shrink. Kirk learns that they are the descendants of human colonists from a colony named Terratin, number 10, leading to the name Terratin. The rays on the planet shrunk them to this miniature size, which is now permanent and can't be reversed. They beg for Kirk to save them, but he's not having that at the moment. He beams up the Enterprise crew, which they had beamed away, and returns them to normal size, and the Terratins donate dilithium to replace the crystals that were destroyed on the ship. Only after this is done does Kirk consent to saving the Terratins from imminent destruction from earthquakes and lava flows, and he beams up their city, promising to relocate it to another planet, at which the Terratins name the Enterprise crew honorary members of their society. The end.
Welcome to Gulliver's Travels.
Yeah.
Father Cory, your overall?
Or One Little Ship, the DS9 episode.
Oh, right. They've done this before. Again, Father Cory, your overall impression of this story?
This wasn't too bad. This was a good story. And hey, one of these where the transporter can actually solve the problem. Because how many times we complained about that, they could just beam them, run them through the transporter buffer and life is good. Well, this is one case where, as soon as Kirk was beamed down, the problem was solved. So make sure everybody goes through, which they, of course, do to restore them to their normal size. But it wasn't a bad story. It was a good story. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Jimmy?
Yeah, it was fine. It had some stuff I liked in it. The Kirk's attitude is a little surprising. That he's found lost human colonists, and he's like, I'm going to let you guys get swallowed up by cracks in your planet's surface and lava flows until you give me exactly what I want. And he doesn't even spell out the terms. He just keeps them hanging in terms of, is he going to save them or not? And it's like, well, first I want my crew back. Okay, he gets the bridge crew back. And now I want dilithium crystals. And only after that does he say, yeah, okay, I'll save you now. So he's playing hardball here. But there's interesting stuff in this episode. We get on, in sickbay, we see a couple of species. This is kind of like out of Dr. Phlox's playbook, but down in the sickbay, Dr. McCoy has something called gossamer mice, which are basically like transparent mice. And they also have something called a halo fish that is a fish, and it generates a halo around its body. And so it's neat getting to see these science fiction creatures. On the other hand, not everything has been fully thought through. because at one point, Nurse Chapel falls in the Gossamer fish's fish tank, and Kirk has to dive in to rescue her, has to rescue her, and he does so using a needle and thread, which to him is like a harpoon and a rope at this size. But it's like, okay, the reason she fell in the fish tank was because she was going to get a bone knitting laser to heal Sulu's broken leg from a fall. And it's like, so what are y'all doing with a needle and thread in sickbay, especially laying out unsterilized? So that doesn't really make sense. But they did have a number of things that were nice in the conceptual department. When they first noticed the size differential between them and the ship, Kirk's first thought is the ship has expanded. And Spock points out, or it could be that we've shrunk. And so it's nice that they're thinking relativistically, you could look at it either way. And then the way Kirk, they don't make a big deal out of this, but the way they do it visually, but the way that Kirk knows he's returned to normal size when he beams down to the planet is because before he left, Spock gave him a jury-rigged communicator. Because a normal communicator, it's not made of inorganic matter. Their communicators are not shrinking with them. So Spock jury-rigged a tiny communicator so that Kirk would have a chance of communicating with the ship, even though they're not sure about its range. And when he beams down, even though the communicator was big in his hands, now it's tiny. It's just a little thing on his palm. And so he knows, I've expanded again. The transporter reset the distance between my molecules. It's also nice that they notice their weight is not changing, because what this is doing, it's not eliminating atoms from their bodies, it's moving them closer together, which actually doesn't make sense in terms of how electron shells work, but we can pass over that.
Yeah.
So going back to the needle and thread, the issue of having a needle and thread in sick bay, unsterilized and all that wasn't the thing. What brought discontinuity with that is, okay, he pulls this woman who is still weighing 100 plus pounds out of this fish tank with a needle and thread.
Yeah.
A needle and thread cannot pull 100 pounds of anything, no matter how small it is, out of a fish tank.
Well,
that was more the bigger issue than just, because this is the 23rd century. They could wave a magic wand over it and it's immediately sterilized. So, I mean, that's not an issue.
Well, or it also could be Sinclair monofilament line from Larry Niven's Known Space that could support a 100-pound woman.
Right.
But they didn't go into any of that.
Yeah. Could be her. She was doing a sewing project. It wasn't even a.
There you go.
Stitches. I look at just look at this. It's another one of these in the Land of the Giants style stories that were very popular in the 60s and 70s, and we saw in Doctor Who doing it. Lots of shows did this sort of thing.
Land of the Giants did it.
The Land of the Giants, right? It's a lot more difficult, although not impossible, to realize this in a live action. But if you're going to do, I feel like that's what the animated series was all about. It was exploring the science fiction possibilities that you couldn't have explored on the budget that we had in the live action series. So let's, we've got animation, so let's go crazy.
Although
try all these new things.
Obvious reuse of footage was pretty obvious in this one, where Kirk is supposedly shrinking, and they show him in his seat, normal sized.
Yeah, normal size. I noticed that. Yeah. I mean, they did try to anticipate the issues, like as they shrink, they shrunk below the electric eye that opens the door to the turbo lift.
I made a list of the difficulties they faced. One of them is the electric eye, so they have to find something to wave in front of the electric eye so they can get into the elevator. How they then turned those handles to tell it where they wanted to go, I don't know. They also have to use both hands to push buttons down. They had to use the helmsman and navigator positions. They built these ladders to get up to console level. And then when they were doing, in addition to the rigged communicator that Spock gave Kirk in the transporter room, they also had to use cables or threads or string or something, and a team of guys doing heave-ho in order to pull the transporter switches.
Yeah.
Yep.
Again, they made this the point about them being the same mass, and I'm thinking, so if they're the same mass, then operating the button should be fine, right? You just stand on the button. You're 180 pounds or whatever, Spock is. And
you might not want to break the button. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But they will wave their hand to that. I thought it was funny at the beginning. The mission that they're on is surveying an old gas giant or old supernova, I think it is. And they get this distress call, or they get this call. They're not quite sure what it is. And McCoy is like, should we really be interrupting this supernova survey? He's like very distressed at this idea. We could just go back afterward if it's nothing, right? I mean, it's not like we're never going to be able to come back. I had a very dad reaction to that.
McCoy is very uncharacteristically dismissive, very scientifically incurious, or especially normally you'd think it would be Spock who would say, but sir, we have an important scientific mission. And McCoy would be going, my God, man, we've just heard a lost distress call. We have to go.
Well, they weren't even sure it was a distress call to begin with. But it's just a signal that they thought was kind of random, and all of a sudden they found a couple of words in it. It's like, oh, wait, this isn't random.
Well, but McCoy could be like, this could be a distress call.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a waste of time if you ask me. Well, you got something better to do? Like you got some important appointment to go to? I just thought it was funny.
It was really supposed to be his downtime. That was supposed to be his vacation time while they're studying this gas giant, and he didn't get it.
One thing that they addressed, and they did it fairly obliquely, but fans would be wondering, so if they're all shrinking, why aren't they coming out of their clothing? Why aren't they all naked? And they explain, our uniforms are made out of algae-based xenolon, so they're shrinking with us since our uniforms are made out of algae.
Right. So, like, if it had been cotton, for instance, it's an organic material; it would shrink, or wool,
but not polyester.
Yep.
Yeah,
and that's why you should wear. That's why you should wear cotton or wool and forget polyester. So if you ever get caught in a shrinking ray, your clothes will shrink with you.
That's right.
I'd have to check. I mean, I'd have to check because polyester is made out of petroleum products, and petroleum is organic.
That's true. Organic chemistry. So you mentioned that their weight stays the same. We've talked about that several times. Their space between the molecules is compressing. It kind of reminds me of Ant-Man, like the Ant-Man way of doing things. Like his mass remains the same. It's just the compressing the space. The PIM particles compress the space between molecules. So I thought that was interesting.
Speaking of uncharacteristic, out of character things, at one point while they're shrinking, and they figure they're going to get down to 1/16 of an inch or less than 1/16 of an inch in size before their atoms are so close together they can't get any closer. But they'll lose control of the Enterprise when they're 1 centimeter tall, which is more than 1/16 of an inch.
Right.
And at that point, Sulu wants to shoot the planet.
Yeah.
And it's like, Kirk is like, what good is that going to do? And Sulu's like, I don't know, but we got to do something. Let's shoot it.
Yeah. We'll feel better.
And then that's when he falls off his ladder and breaks his leg.
Yeah. It was. I was wondering whether they're trying to make it like it was affecting them mentally or something. It was kind of uncharacteristic of Sulu. He didn't seem,
that was basically so that he could get knocked off of the console by his from the machine the dial that he was operating.
So I thought it was interesting that the effect on the dilithium crystals is that they're unwinding. Their crystalline structure is being caused to unwind.
Whereas everyone else's DNA is winding tighter.
Yeah, and the winding tighter DNA is what's making them shrink, which doesn't make any sense, but okay. When you mentioned Sulu falling and breaking his leg and in Chapel falling into the fish tank, I'm like, this is a really clumsy crew. Like people keep falling all over the place. Like it's not like the being shorter made you more susceptible to falls. Like she trips over this thing in front of her. It's just kind of funny.
McCoy also talks about how we're getting more and more reports of fall injuries from all over the ship. So it's not just Sulu and Chapel.
Yeah, they're very clumsy.
Well, if you're used to being a certain height, you become uncoordinated, I guess. I don't know.
I guess. I mean, if you're small with the same weight, the same mass, I could see that maybe affecting how you move around. I mean, that would be very strange. Especially if your mass is compacting.
Especially if you're having to climb on your desk and stuff like that to get stuff done.
It's a good thing those desks are pretty durable there on the Enterprise, though. You know, somebody who's 180 pounds standing on it doesn't break it, so that's a good thing.
Right. When Kirk wants to beam down, Spock does note that the transporter maintains a record of the body's structure, and so what will going through the transport do? So I like the fact that they note that before Kirk beams down. Like, it's going through this transporter could be very, it's unpredictable, could be very dangerous, could be bad. But but they end up doing that, and as you say, it restores Kirk to full size, which is good.
They also address the lung air volume issue, because if you're tiny, you're not going to be able to push as much air through your lungs, and that's going to affect your voice. Yep. What they don't do is note that it would, at least it's thought, and I assume this is true, that it would be higher pitched because of the length of your vocal cords. But they do acknowledge that their voices are not as loud when they're in the small form. And like Kirk is, once he's restored to normal size, he's talking to Scotty and Scotty's crew who've come up to the bridge since the bridge crew got beamed away. And Scotty's like, "Sir, you're going to deafen us."
Yeah.
Which prompts Kirk to whisper. So that was nice that they dealt with that aspect of the science.
Mm-hmm. They did not address the fact that when the bridge crew got beamed away, they didn't get restored. So
that's implicitly addressed. That occurred to me too. The Terratins used their transporter.
Yep.
And so whether it's because Terratin transporters work differently, or whether it's because there was no previous pattern of them in the Terratin transporter, they didn't get restored to size until they came through the Enterprise's transporters.
Right. Oh, okay. That makes sense, I guess. If they're using like the older technology from 200 years previously.
Well they just never been through the Terratin transporter before. There would be no memory pattern of them.
Yeah, the pattern buffers of the Terratin's transporter didn't know that these people should actually be 6 foot tall, 5 foot tall instead of an inch tall.
Right. Hopefully, everyone on the Enterprise has got a pattern in the buffer that they've all beamed aboard.
The one guy who's only gotten on the Enterprise and off the Enterprise via shuttle, it's like, oh, I guess I'm out of luck.
Or like he came on before they flushed the cache the last time. So
I like when Kirk gets the Terratin leader on FaceTime. The leader is like, "In the name of the Terratin people, I forbid you to destroy us." Well, that's effective. What a great line! I'm forbidding you to destroy us.
Yeah. Oh, in that case, maybe I won't.
Yeah.
Another weird thing was at the end, the way Kirk apparently beams them the city aboard is by shooting phasers at it.
I know. I noted that too. It's like he tells Sulu to like shoot a micro-precise laser at it, and they show it beaming out. And it's like, what? Why is Sulu shooting a laser at this city?
Yeah. It says direct forward phasers at the Terratin city set for pinpoint fire pattern. That's what Kirk says. They fire the phasers, and then in the transporter room, there it is, sitting on the transporter pad.
Some sort of augmentation to the transporters using the phasers. I mean, like a 3D mapping with the laser. I don't know.
They could have explained that, but they didn't.
That just sounds like that. Well, that's one of these cases where I say that got to be a writing flaw that they did something there without.
There might it's either a writing flaw on that level, or they might have had an explanation that got cut for some reason, like, because of the details of this city, we need extra precise mapping. So Mr. Sulu map it with the phasers, and then then when that got cut, possibly for time, and the line about doing the firing got left in, maybe.
And again, given that their mass is conserved, you have a city sitting inside the ship on the transporter pad.
On the transporter pad, that's a tough transporter pad.
That is tough.
How many thousands of pounds are sitting there?
Yeah.
Yeah. The city must be made out of some fancy metamaterials or something, because if like you were walking on normal wood or normal, ceramics or something for the floor, you would, if at that size ratio, your feet would go through it.
Yep.
Right. Oh, right. No, the city is not organic, so therefore wouldn't be the mass of the city. That's right. It's just the people.
But the people, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The people. Right.
But they should be if it's normal like ceramics or something for the floor, like it looks. You punch holes in it as walking across it.
So doesn't bear too close of a look at those details, I guess, of the story.
Yeah, or the electron shells, because there's a reason molecules are spaced the way they are. You can't. The electrons, it's electrons that connect two atoms to each other. That's why they link. It's because two atoms will share an electron between them. And that's what forms an electrical connection. So that's the reason that solid objects are solid, is they've got these electrical links between different atoms that form the molecules. But electrons can, under the laws of quantum mechanics, electrons can only exist in certain shells around the atom, and the electrons that connect the molecules or connect the atoms into molecules have to be on the outermost shell. So the only way that you could shrink molecules in this way is if you tampered with the laws of quantum mechanics and shrunk the electron shells. And as we all know, you cannot change the laws of physics.
That's
unless you're Q.
Yeah.
Yes. So, final thoughts on this one, Father Cory?
It wasn't bad, but yeah, don't think about it too deeply.
Yeah. Any other notes on this, Jimmy?
No, I thought it was an okay episode. I like how they did think about various aspects of it, but there are also things they didn't really think about.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty good for the animated series. It's pretty, that's how it has gone. All right. So I did promise we have feedback from our recent discussion of TNG's Angel 1. And the first bit of feedback comes from Ryan, who sent in an email. He says, I have to echo what Jimmy said in last week's episode when he mentioned the final scene to Toy Story. I also really enjoy unexpected character resurrections and recently had the same thoughts on the rocket scene in Toy Story. My 8-month-old can't get enough. When all hope is lost and it seems like our heroes' fates are sealed, they surprise us by coming back in the end. I had a similar reaction to Chris Pratt's survival in the movie Passengers.
Which I've seen,
but I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember what happens in that one. Then Marin Anguish 9928 on YouTube made a point at 32 minutes and 27 seconds in the video. Says, minor point, but I thought Jimmy believed in theistic evolution and would therefore accept that evolution is not in fact truly random, though it may appear so. Jimmy, you had been commenting at that point in the video on evolution.
Yeah. So evolution, I believe in God, and so he's ultimately in control of everything. And therefore he may have intervened in evolution at various points, or he may have set up the process so it would produce the results he wanted. But there's not a direction that you can show to evolution. That was the point I was making, is there's not a direction to evolution in terms of the natural processes that science has thus far documented and been and accepted. What happens via natural selection is you have these random mutations occurring, and if they confer a survival and reproduction advantage, then they get selected for. If they confer a survival and reproduction detriment, they get selected against. And if they are neutral in terms of survival and reproduction, they may or may not persist. But it's not like you have a clear direction in each species of it's going somewhere. What it's doing is it's adapting to changing environmental conditions. And so, as the environment changes, that puts different selection pressures on which genes are useful for survival and reproduction. That doesn't mean that God's not operating behind the scenes and has a grand plan for all this. It just means you can't, from a scientific perspective, say evolution has an end point that it's heading towards with each species. There may be a divine endpoint that God is guiding everything towards, but in strictly scientific terms, all that's happening in evolution is creatures are adapting to their current environmental conditions. There's not a direction that's scientifically observable that's pushing them in a particular direction, apart from changing environmental conditions. Okay. Which is part of how God may be doing evolution. If he wants them to go somewhere, he may change the environmental conditions that'll push them somewhere.
I hope that helps Marin Anguish. Mm-hmm. And our next feedback comes from Amber, who sent in an email. She says, I just listened to your episode on Angel 1 and have a slightly odd perspective. You mentioned that the writers did not have a woman on the show as a writer, as if that was a fault. I don't actually think that would have improved the show, because the main fault of the show was that it forgot the point of gender complementarianism is children. It never explored that aspect. In my experience in theology, it is often the case that male theologians more adequately understand this than do female, often to the detriment of mothers. Male theologians have no illusion that they represent women, so they have to carefully consider all aspects of womanhood. Feminist theologians are often childless and yet trick themselves into thinking that their opinions represent all women. She gives as an example, Amber does, an example of the getting rid of the rite of churching, which a lot of people don't do anymore. That's where a mother after pregnancy, whether it's successful pregnancy or miscarriage of some sort, is given a blessing the first time she comes back to church. That is done away with.
Well, no, it is still in the Book of Blessings, so you can request that.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess it fell out of favor, she says, because feminists.
Well, and they don't use the term churching anymore. They don't use the term churching anymore, so that's part of it. But there is a book of blessing, and you know I've heard of it being done as part of the baptism rite, where because you know ideally a child should be baptized. And by the way, this is my pitch as a pastor: your child should be baptized as quickly as possible after birth, even if you can't get the family together. You know, It wasn't uncommon that you would just have a small ceremony a week or two after birth, but you know that at that same time, then they would do that blessing as well for the mother.
Amber does make the point, which is that when this was more common and regular, women who had miscarriages could also receive that blessing on a regular basis,
and it's still there.
And it was a benefit for them. So it's maybe something we should bring back.
Yeah.
But her larger point is that just having women on the writing staff would not necessarily have made it less problematic.
Well, maybe I'd have to rethink through that. It's been a few weeks since we did that one, but I agree with her point that male theologians tend to have a greater appreciation of the complementarity of the sexes, and feminist theologians tend not to.
Yep.
I would note that not all feminist theologians are women, though. There are men who are ideologically feminist, and they get similar blind spots.
And there are women theologians who have much better understanding than that too. So there's some really good ones out there that have come out with
some of my good friends.
Janet Smith, for example.
Yep. Erica Bacchiacchi, Angela. Not Angela Cialana. I got her name mixed up. My friend Angela is also a doctor of theology. Both very good in this area. Dave Rutan on YouTube writes, Star Trek meets Star Maidens, 1976. Similar idea and equally as entertaining. Star Maidens, I had to look it up because I hadn't heard of it before, was a British-German science fiction television series produced in 1975 and broadcast in 1976. I think it didn't last more than one season as far as I can tell. It had a similar premise of a science fiction story about a
female-dominated civilization. Society.
Yeah, it's a similar thing, but I don't know if it exists anywhere for people to go take a look at and see what it was like. But it was only 13
find it on
episodes.
YouTube somewhere or something like that, I'm sure.
Yeah,
or
Daily Motion.
Daily Motion.
Yeah.
It's like YouTube without the copyright annoyance stuff.
Right. Well, because in Britain, the copyright works a little differently. YouTube doesn't necessarily recognize that. So Daily Motion is, I think they're based in Britain, and so they get that. All right, that's all of our feedback. Thank you all for your feedback. We really appreciate it. Now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Trek. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. What did you think of the Terratin incident? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there as well. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Next Generation episode, The Enemy. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, I have never slumped in my life.